In this review, I'm going to tell you why, in my experience, Company of Heroes 2 is the best strategy game I've ever played, even years after its release. I'll also go over which version of the game you should buy and whether you should get it at full price or wait for a sale. I don't typically play real-time strategy games, but Company of Heroes 2 is so good that it's not only my favorite RTS, it's one of the best games I've played across any genre. Note that since I'm not an expert at strategy games, this review should give you some idea of what you should expect as a newcomer. Also, a lot of my review is going to focus on playing skirmish matches against the AI, but a lot of what I'll be covering will apply to the campaigns as well. Both the skirmish matches and the campaigns are good, but for me, the best part of the game is playing the skirmish matches because that's where a lot of the replay value is as well. So with all of that said, let me get into the 6 reasons why I feel that this is the best RTS game that I've ever played, and I'll start with pacing and balance. Even though the different armies are asymmetrical, the balance and pacing is fantastic. A lot of RTS games has economy building at the start of a match, which is initially interesting but becomes tedious as you play more and more matches over time. Company of Heroes 2 has no repetitive economy building at the start, and it basically gets you straight into the action and tactical combat. The entire economy is based around capturing and sometimes reinforcing points on the battlefield. And basically, the way this is controlled is through 4 different resources. So you have manpower, which I'll speak about in a second, then you have munitions and fuel, both of which you can gather faster by capturing specific points on the map. And finally, you have a population cap, which forces the player to think strategically about which troops to deploy. Unlike most other RTS games, the game is set up in such a way that it is entirely possible to fight your way back even if you took critical losses. There's less of a snowball effect going on here. The less troops you have deployed, the more manpower resource you'll get, and that means that it is slightly easier to fight your way back if you sustained critical losses at some point in the match. This is a huge departure from classic RTS games like Age of Empires, where the enemy marching into your base and cutting down villagers means that you may as well resign because the odds of you winning becomes extremely slim. Company of Heroes 2, by contrast, feels fun and interesting even when you're losing because you always feel like you're still in with a chance, and there's always a reason to keep on fighting. I've had matches where I thought I had no chance of winning only to eventually fight my way back against the AI. Likewise, I've had cases where I thought the win was in the bag only to be surprised by the AI later in the same match. So moving on from pacing and balance, let's talk about fun and realism. This game does the rock, paper, scissors thing where certain units counter other units, and it really doubles down on this concept in a way that also reinforces realism. So for example, there is no point in attacking a tank with soldiers that doesn't have explosives or anti-tank weapons. At the same time, it is possible to take out a group of tanks if you ambush them with a large enough group of anti-tank troops or lure them into some anti-tank mines that you've placed. A strategically captured civilian building filled with anti-tank troops, a machine gun and a sniper can be nearly impossible for the enemy to approach. However, you can lure them out by firing at them with artillery outside their range, or simply bring the whole building down on top of them with some late game heavy artillery. I'm no expert on World War II, but the counters feel realistic enough while also being balanced to ensure that the game remains fun and interesting by making sure that the player has to keep thinking on their feet. The AI is also some of the best I've seen, probably the best I've seen in any strategy game. There are different difficulty settings to match all levels, but even on the easier difficulty settings, you should expect the AI to react to what you are doing intelligently. If, for example, you've put all of your resources into tanks, expect that the AI will start gearing up with anti-tank equipment once they realize what you've done. Likewise, if you put all of your defenses into a single location, don't expect that the AI will simply keep sending troops there to die. They will start searching for weaknesses in your defenses, and they will exploit them once they find it. It also never felt like the AI was cheating. They are bound by the same rules that you as the player are. So now moving on to one of the best parts of this game, which is the evolution of the battlefield. So there are a wide variety of maps, from cities to harbors to farmlands and more. Some are completely untouched by war when you start, and others are war-torn when you arrive. However, the map also evolves as you play. This is clearly visible in terms of the look and feel, but it also has real implications for gameplay. Everything is destructible, and everything you do will leave a mark, from tanks leaving their tracks in the mud and grass to explosives bringing down entire buildings and bridges. For example, a wall that provided cover for your troops in the early game can be destroyed in a second as a tank drives through it in the late game. Minutes later, the same tank can be destroyed by your troops and used as wreckage for cover. A beautiful small town in the farmlands can be converted into a black war-torn mess of ruins, craters and wrecks littering the landscape. It's incredible that a game with this much detail runs so well, and that the developers have managed to give gameplay implications for the evolution of the battlefield that remains both interesting and balanced throughout the game. And this brings me on to the next point, which is immersion. Even today, long after the release, this game still looks and sounds great. One of the small touches that I really appreciated is that soldiers' voice acting sound a lot more realistic than other RTS games. One example is that sometimes when soldiers are just standing around with downtime between combat, you'll hear them having these little discussions about random things that sound really authentic.
Guys who said the water was bad and they were ordered to drink wine until it was cleared up? Yeah, we need to start us a rumor.
It's sufficient to be interesting, but not repeated so often that it becomes boring. This helps to feel more attached to your soldiers, especially because there are strong incentives to keep them alive. Units gain veterancy and they can become incredibly powerful if you can focus on giving them combat experience while also keeping units alive, retreating when necessary, and getting them medical care and reinforcement when they require it. This again ties back to the realism because of course soldiers having combat experience would have a significant advantage over fresh recruits. So moving on to point number 5, there is a huge amount of content and replay value in this game. For the purposes of this review, I'll talk specifically about the content included in the franchise edition, which is a big pack with a lot of DLC and a lot of content. So in Company of Heroes 2, there are 5 playable armies. These include the US armies, British armies, Russian armies, and 2 different German armies. Each army also has different commanders that you can select, which brings radically different units and strategies. For example, one of the US commanders focuses on paratroopers, which allows you to drop troops and weapons behind enemy lines. Another has a big focus on artillery, allowing you to call in unique artillery trucks and off-map artillery, among other things. As mentioned, the game is asymmetrical in some ways, which means that playing different armies can feel like playing an entirely new game. There is also a huge amount of variety in the maps, and there are a lot of maps included both from the developers and the community. Again, even playing the same armies moving from one map to the next can sometimes feel like playing a completely different game due to how different the required strategies can be. And then moving on to the final reason, this game has a really good difficulty curve. This game is very accessible for new players, at least if you're going to be playing against the AI. On easy, the AI will tend to focus on getting enough points on the map, but it generally won't keep hassling the player beyond a certain point, which allows new players some time to regroup and fight back. At the same time, as soon as you start pushing to capture key points from the AI, they will counterattack, which keeps the game interesting even for new players. As you start increasing the difficulty, the game gets significantly more challenging, and since there is so much nuance and variety to every map, army and unit, it means that Company of Heroes 2 is a game that is relatively easy to learn, but can be incredibly hard to master, in a really good way. There is always something new to learn, and the process of learning feels rewarding as opposed to frustrating. So if you don't already own this game, should you buy it? The game is worth the full price, so you won't be disappointed even at that price point. However, from time to time they offer very deep discounts that allows you to purchase the bundles with the DLC included as well. If you can find it on a sale, I'd recommend buying the Company of Heroes Franchise Edition. This will give you access to Company of Heroes 2 with all the important DLC, but you'll also get the original Company of Heroes, which is also still worth playing. If you have played Company of Heroes 2, let me know what your thoughts are on the game in the comments below, and as always, if you like this kind of content, do like and subscribe, and I'll see you for the next video.